In this video, I'm going to show the connection of the number 14 to Horus, the World Trade Center, Washington, D.C., the Large Hadron Collider, and the year 5776, which started on the 14th of September 2015 and ends on the 2nd of October 2016. I'm just going to put a disclaimer in here that any source or person that is reviewed in this video does not necessarily believe or agree with the conclusions that I reach in this video. Also, the conclusions I make in this video are purely my opinion, and they are open to interpretation.
When I saw that, I wanted to know where, 13 steps, 1776 in Roman numerals at the base of a 13-stepped pyramid, over which hovers the eye of Apollo, the eye of Osiris, Horus, and even U.S. presidents, Roosevelt, vice presidents, Henry Wallace, believed, they were 32nd degree Freemasons, they believed that that was a prophecy about the return of the great architect of the universe, their deity, basically. This is written in their own memoirs. This is not me making this up. And they believed that it was their responsibility to put that seal on the dollar, which would then set in motion what would ultimately lead to a new world order. Both Anuet Coeptus, Novus Ordo Seclorum, and by the way, the greatest experts in the world, including Robert Hieronymus, who the government considers to be the foremost authority on this seal, say in their writings that this is the prophecy of the coming of a pagan god at the end of time. The Novus Ordo Seclorum is taken from the Cumae Sibyl. If you go to the Sistine Chapel and look up into the Sistine Chapel, the Cumae Sibyl is placed alongside the Old Testament prophets. It's startling, but this prophecy is from the Cumae. And her prophecy, if you read her prophecy, "'Tis thine own Apollo comes." She is specifically talking about Apollo. The reason that's important is because in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, speaking of the Antichrist, who will also herald the coming of a new world order and a global dictatorship, Paul says he will be the son of perdition. And the Greek word, as you know, perdition, apoleia, Apollyon, Apollo. John says in the Apocalypse that the beast will rise up out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, apoleia, Apollyon, Apollo. So that most Americans are completely not aware that there is a prophecy on the U.S. dollar about the coming of the man we would identify as Christians as the Antichrist. So I'm just telling you that those facts can't be disputed, and even the greatest experts, even the 33rd degree Freemasonic Council out of Washington, D.C., the Herodome, the House of the Temple, I went and met with them. I said, here's what I believe this mythology represents, and they said, you are right. That's exactly what it represents.
So we're going to look at the mystery school religions, beliefs in symbols and buildings and ancient constructions. Now, obviously, a large part of the mystery schools come out of Egypt, and one of the main parts of the mystery religions is the Pyramid of Giza. And one of the aspects of that is that its height of 481.1 feet is very close to 5,776 inches. Now, that height is debatable because there is no capstone, so no one really knows exactly how high it would be. Based on the trigonometry, it would be 481.1 feet, which is 5,772 inches. But because we don't have the capstone, and because the capstone could quite easily be 5,776 inches high or 481.3 feet, the Masons believe that it represents 5,776 inches. So that's what we're going to use, and we're going to see how that ties in with everything. Well, first of all, it ties in with the year 5776 on the Hebrew calendar, which started on the 14th of September 2015. Now, why would that be important? Well, it's important because the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, their calendar follows the Hebrew calendar. And you can see that on this slide here, which you can pause to read to find out exactly why and how. But on the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry calendar, we are in the year 5776. Now this all goes back to obviously Egypt and Isis and Osiris, and from the legend that Set killed him, cut him up into 14 pieces, and threw away his manhood, and a fish or a crocodile ate it. Isis then found his body parts, and she found 13 body parts, and she made a 14th part, his manhood, and she copulated with that on him and gave birth from the 14th piece to Horus. So we see that Horus was brought from the spiritual world into the physical world with the 14th piece, which had to be made. Now that's very important because we're going to see how this has been reflected right now into this modern day and right now into this year 5776. So here you can see on the symbol on the American dollar bill and the seal of America how the year 1776, written in Roman numerals here, relates to the year 5776 on the Freemasonry calendar. But the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry calendar, that year 5776 is in this year 576, which is the year 14th of September 2015 to the 2nd of October 2016. Interesting, isn't it, that this year 5776 started on the 14th of September. And remember, this video is all about the 14th piece, which brings back Horus. Now we're going to check and see this eye. What does this eye represent? Some people say it represents Horus. Well, let's see. So from this Masonic advert, we see this blue eye over this villa with this name Tivoli written on it. We also see a temple in the top left hand corner. So what does this mean? Well, at Tivoli is the temple of Apollo at Hadrian's villa, and this temple that's shown in the left top corner is very similar to this temple at Delios, which was dedicated to Apollo. So Horus is the Egyptian name for the Egyptian god, and Horus was later identified by the Greeks with Apollo. So we see that Apollo and Horus are the same. And why is that important? Because we see in Revelation 9:11, and we'll come back to that 9:11, it says, "And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon." So we see there's a king in the bottomless pit, an angel, and if he's their king, they need to bring him out, don't they? And they're going to use the 14th piece. So let's follow on. Is this the 14th piece? Yes, because you have 13 rows of masonry, and then that would be the 14th piece. Now, is this 14th piece actually Apollo? Well, it's actually just his eye, or the eye of Horus. And it's the 14th piece that brings Horus back from the spiritual dimension to the physical dimension. Just like Isis did with Osiris, she made the 14th piece and brought Horus back from the spiritual dimension into the physical dimension. Now that is reflected in the One World Trade Center. If we look at these two side by side, you'll see you have Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order, you have the One World Trade Building, You have 1776 in Roman numerals there. You have 1776 feet reflected in the height of the mast on the One World Trade Center. You have the Eye of Apollo, or the Eye of Horus, or the Eye of Nimrod at the top. You have the One World Observatory, and what do you do with your eye? You observe. That is at the top. You have a pyramid there, you have a pyramid there. Now what's also interesting, as you saw earlier, you have the 13 layers of masonry, then you have the 14th piece, which is the capstone with the Eye of Horus in it. Well, if you look at the One World Trade Center, from the tragedy of 9/11, 2001, you have 13 years to 2014. Now, the One World Trade Center was opened for business at the end of 2014, which is 13 years after 9/11, 2001, which represents the 13 layers. Then, in the year 2015, the 14th year, the One World Observatory was opened, and that is reflected in the Eye of Horus, which is in the 14th piece on the capstone here. You also have a starlight burst, or a Big Bang, or the Large Hadron Collider collision behind the eye. And now you say Large Hadron Collider collision? Well, I'm going to show you that in the further slides. And there you have the starlight burst behind the One World Observatory, reflecting the Great Seal of America. And I've got a short clip of the advert, one of the adverts they ran for this, which I'll show you here now.
And soon, the world will see forever. One World Observatory. Opening spring 2015.
We also see that the height of the One World Trade Center is 104 stories. You drop the 0, you then again have your 14, representing the completion of the pyramid with the 14th piece in place. And there was a beam signed by Barack Obama, and interesting that that signing was done on the 14th day of the month. Interesting coincidence there, isn't it? And here you can see the opening of the One World Trade Center was on the 3rd of November 2014, which is just a little over 13 years from 9/11 2001. 13 years ago. And here the One World Observatory was opened on May the 29th 2015. Now what's interesting is that there's a coincidence here, because May the 29th is the same day that Peter Higgs was born, and Peter Higgs was known for his broken symmetry in electroweak theory, Higgs boson, Higgs field, Higgs mechanism, and of course he won the Nobel Prize, just to bring it to your attention. And here you see a picture of him standing at one of the detectors, or an image of one of the detectors at the Large Hadron Collider, and you can see it represents the blue eye of Horus or Apollo. Now we're going to come back to Peter Higgs, because he represents something. He represents the man that makes the Eye of Horus to bring Horus back. Just like Isis had to make the 14th piece to bring Horus back from the spiritual dimension to the physical dimension, Peter Higgs represents that in our present day and age, and you'll see that in the coming slides. So at the One World Trade Center, in the One World Observatory, you have the Sky Portal. Now the Sky Portal represents the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Apollo. And how do we know that? Well, first of all, they even give us the dimension of this Sky Portal. They say that its diameter is 14 feet. Remember, the 14th piece, you have the 13 layers of masonry, you have the 14th piece as the Eye of Horus. Now, if you take the 14th feet as diameter and you want to work out the circumference, well, what's interesting is the circumference is exactly 44 feet if you use the pi of the Giza pyramid. And that pi is 22 divided by 7, and that is exactly what the pi of the Giza pyramid is. And this pyramid on the seal is based on the Pyramid of Giza. So you have a 14th diameter circle portal, they call it the Sky Portal, it has blue associated with it, and we know the eye of Horus and the eye of Apollo is blue, and its circumference is exactly 44 feet using Giza pi. Now, why is that important? Well, Alistair Crowley, who wrote many books dictated to him, as he said, by a spirit who was a messenger of Horus. In those books, he wrote that 44 is the sacred number of Horus. So do you see how that's all connected? And not only that, the word beast is mentioned 44 times in the book of Revelation. So we'll come back to that later as well, but I thought that was very interesting. So you can see there's no doubt about it that the One World Trade Center represents the eye of Horus, and it was completed in the 14th year after 9/11. It represents the 14th piece that brings Horus from the spiritual world into the physical world. And here you can see the eye of Horus is represented as blue, and this is from the 2015 halftime show that Katy Perry had. She had a little island with sharks on it, but if you look at this from a distance, you see it represents the blue eye of Horus. And here is the ALICE detector at the Large Hadron Collider. You can see how they represent this. It's the same. It's the eye of Horus. And what happens in the Large Hadron Collider? You have collisions to see what looked like at the beginning of the universe, at the Big Bang. And there you can see what did the universe look like just after the Big Bang. So how does Peter Higgs feature in this? Well, it was through his work and his imagination that this whole project of the Higgs boson and the construction and building of the Large Hadron Collider, it is a result of his imagination to bring about this device that would bring Horus back from the spiritual world into the physical world. And we have an example of that in the movie The Gods of Egypt, which came out this year, 2016, where a man has to get the eye, the 14th piece, to bring the god back, Horus, god of the sky. Now, where is the other connection of the Large Hadron Collider to the Eye of Horus and the pyramid and the completion of the pyramid? Well, the Rugby World Cup opening ceremony, which was on the 18th of September 2015, 4 days after the start of the year 5776, well, they had quite elaborate ceremony in which they featured William Webb Ellis, who was supposedly the originator of the game of rugby, and he did it by breaking the laws of football by picking up the ball and running with it. He is the lawless one because he broke the laws of football. He represents the rebel of heaven, or Horus or Apollo. And they make a pyramid of bodies, and he climbs it to the top, and you can see it's a pyramid. He's at the top holding the World Cup, showing that they've completed the building of the pyramid. And then you have these two circuits of metal which have light beams which generate in one direction, and you have another circuit going that way with light going in a direction, and they meet and they collide at the top here. Now what's interesting is when he raises the cup, these lights that were moving and colliding at the top here, they stop and they start flashing blue. And we saw earlier that the Eye of Horus and the Eye of Apollo is blue. So you have here a representation of the pyramid with the lawless one at the top, and a collision or a light burst or the Big Bang represented by the Large Hadron Collider, represented by this structure where the light collides behind the capstone. So there you have it. That light burst represents the Big Bang or the collision of the Large Hadron Collider. There's no doubt about it, it's all there to be seen. So here is a representation of a collision in the Large Hadron Collider. This is a simulation of a collision in the Large Hadron Collider. So we're going to see how this is represented at the 2016 halftime show, and it's represented in the hair of this woman who claims to be Sasha Fierce when she performs. Now we're going to look at this name Sasha Fierce because what it's really representing is a goddess from Egypt, and the goddess from Egypt that she's representing in the Egyptian belief is a personification of the Eye of Horus. And here we can see a pyramid is made, and she, Sasha Fierce, is at the capstone of this pyramid. You have 6 dancers there and 6 dancers there. She represents the 7th on this line, and she represents the 7th on this line. So where these two come together, she represents the 14th piece, right? On the top of the pyramid, the 14th piece. But not only that, she also represents the collision of the Large Hadron Collider, because the Large Hadron Collider collides, it's designed to collide at 14 tera electron volts. You have 2 beams going in opposite directions at 7 tera electron volts, and where they collide, the collision energy is 14 tera electron volts. So you can see she not only represents the 14th piece, capstone, and Eye of Horus on the pyramid, but she also personifies the actual Eye of Horus, and her hair represents the collision in the Large Hadron Collider, the Big Bang. And there you can see the Large Hadron Collider image and the 14 tera electron volt collision. Now what's interesting about this 14 tera electron volts, they haven't run it yet at the full strength 14 tera electron volts, but when do they plan to do that? Well, they plan to do it in 2016 to 2017. Large Hadron Collider likely to reach its designed energy of 14 tera electron volts. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? That in this year 5776, the year of light, that the Large Hadron Collider is likely to reach its design energy of 14 tera electron volts. So here I'm going to show you where Sasha Fierce represents the goddess Wajit, and here it is. Wajit became a deity of heat and fire, and this enhanced her role as protector. With such fierce powers, she could use not only poison but flames against the enemies of the pharaoh. And there you can see the halftime show, the flames. In this she was called the Lady of the House of Flame. Along with her link to this power, she became connected with the Wajit, the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus, and was thus also connected to other goddesses who took this title, Best. And here is Best. Wajit as Wajit Best, depicted as the body of a woman with a lioness head. Bestet, the body of a woman with the head of a cat. The Eye of Horus is an ancient Egypt symbol of protection, royal power, and good health. The eye is personified in the goddess Wajit. And there you can see the Wajit, the Eye of Horus, the personification of the Eye of Horus in the goddess with the body of a woman and the head of a lion. And here from the tour I Am Sasha Fierce, we see her representing herself with the body of a woman and the head of a cat. You can see, it turns into a cat. And then after it does that, it focuses in on the eye. And as it focuses on the eye, you can see a teardrop. And why is that important? Because the eye of Horus has a teardrop. And there's a teardrop. So you can see this, it is a direct reference to the eye of Horus. It then zooms in on the eye, and you see this light, and as it zooms in further, you see it bursting, and there, it's the Big Bang. And that's what the Large Hadron Collider is all about. It's back to the Big Bang. The energy density and temperature that will be made available in the collisions at the Large Hadron Collider are similar to those that existed a few moments after the Big Bang. In this way, physicists hope to discover how the universe evolved. So here is the Sasha Fierce video where she reveals herself as the goddess with the body of a woman and the head of a cat, which is in itself a personification of the eye of Horus. And there's the eye of Horus, even has the teardrop, which we saw the eye of Horus has on my slide. It then goes into the eye to reveal the Big Bang, or the collision within the Large Hadron Collider, to create the conditions just after the Big Bang. So where else do we see this 14th piece? Well, we see it in the actual layout of the streets of Washington, D.C. And this is based on this road that goes at this angle of 53 degrees, which is very close to the Pyramid of Giza's angle of 51.84 degrees. This road ends here in this corner, and if we draw another side of the pyramid on the right hand side at 53 degrees, you'll see it passes through the same circles and it comes down to here. And if we draw a line across to form the base, you'll see that the White House is in the first street block. And if you count the street blocks on the right hand side of this dividing line, you get 13 blocks. And then on the 14th block, which represents the 14th piece, you have a building, and that building is the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry Temple. It's on the 14th block, it represents the 14th piece. And there it is. It even has a pyramid on the top with the missing capstone, which would include the Eye of Horus. Now what's also interesting is if you take a line from the top of that capstone, the top of that platform where the capstone should be, and you take it to the center of the White House, it is exactly 1,776 meters. So that's showing you that the Eye of Horus has a direct connection to the White House. And who sits in the White House? The President of the United States. So we're going to focus on the corners of this pyramid, the base corners. Now what's interesting is right here is the Saudi Arabian embassy, and you can go and look this up yourself. What's interesting is obviously the Saudi connection to 9/11 with the 15 so-called suicide terrorists coming from Saudi Arabia. But we're going to look at what is just beneath the corner. Now I looked at this and it looks like, well, you can see there's a piece missing from the corner of this building. And I thought, well, that looks like a 9. Now this is obviously highly subjective, and I'm not saying that this is a 9, but I'm saying it could potentially be a 9. So let's look a little closer. So there you can see you have this piece missing here, and if I draw a 9 fits in there. Here is from the street view. Now this could look like a 9 or it may not look like a 9, but if it is a 9, then you would expect on the other right hand corner that there would be an 11, and if it wasn't a 9, then the chances of there being 11 on the other side would be nil. So let's have a look at the right hand corner of that pyramid and see what's there. Well, there's an 11, and that is clear. You cannot deny that there's an 11 at the other corner of the pyramid. And there's a street view. So this is the pyramid drawn onto the Washington DC map. The basis of this pyramid is this road, which goes up at this angle of about 53 degrees, which is close to the Pyramid of Giza's angle of 51.84 degrees. The left hand corner there, the right hand corner there is based upon a mirror image of this line, because there is no road going there, it's occulted, but you can see it passes through these circles, the same as that line. The White House is just above the base of this pyramid, and you can see that here. So it's almost as though the White House is on the first layer of masonry on the pyramid. We then have a look and see, so there we have what could be a 9. I'm not saying it is, but it could be construed to be a 9 in that corner. But there is no doubt about the other corner. There is definitely an 11 there, and there is the 11. The other interesting thing I wanted to bring up on this is this line here, which connects the temple and right at the apex of where the capstone would be on the top of the pyramid, and then that connects straight down to the White House. And that line, so there you can see the line ends there in the middle of the White House, and that line is 1,776 meters exactly. And there it is, 1776. So we know that this is the 14th piece, and we know that on the street map of Washington DC, there's a line drawn from the eye to the White House is 1776 meters, and we see that the top layer, the 14th piece, is connected to the first layer, the first piece, and the White House is in the first piece, the first layer. So, and there you have it. So you have the White House being connected to the temple, and specifically the pyramid and the platform of the capstone on top of the temple to the White House. And we know that in the One World Trade Center, the depiction of the Eye of Horus, the sky portal, has a circumference of 44 feet. And Aleister Crowley said 44 was the sacred number of Horus, and beast is mentioned 44 times in Revelation. And we know that the 9/11/2001, 14 years, represents the completion of the pyramid, which is the 11th of September 2015, which is 3 days before the beginning of this year, 5776, which happened on the 14th September 2015. And what is the number of the president that is currently in the White House? Think about it. So this is the end of my presentation, and I'd like you to go and watch this video from Skywatch TV. I'm going to leave a link to it in the footnotes of this video. But in it, Tom Horn says some very interesting things about all of this, and specifically at the end of this video, at around the 25-minute mark, he mentions something interesting about the President of the United States. So thank you for watching my video.